Myles Murphy took a step forward for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2025, and now they have to decide about his fifth-year option. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network in the land. He's James Rapien doing his daily dance. I'm Jake Liscow, bringing you in to today's episode of Locked On Bengals. The everydayers have been watching James dance for years now on this podcast. Welcome back to those of you who make Locked On Bengals part of your daily routine. Today, we're going to dive into the decision the Bengals have to make on Myles Murphy and his fifth-year option. Take a look at the history of the Bengals with fifth-year options, especially recently. We'll put the fifth-year option numbers for Myles Murphy from a financial perspective into perspective against the rest of the edge rusher market and what that kind of money generally gets you. And it is one of the decisions of many, of course. We've talked about a lot of them. We talked yesterday about a potential restructure for Joe Burrow, why that would make sense, why Joe Burrow wouldn't be opposed. We talked about cap cuts earlier this week as well. We've been spending some time this week talking about some of the Bengals offseason decisions to come, and today we'll focus in on Myles Murphy's contract and put that amongst his peers at the edge rusher position. And James, Myles Murphy just turned 24 in January, and I think unambiguously did take a step in 2025. Now, you can talk about how big was that step? How much bigger can you expect continued progress to be for Myles going forward, especially as a pass rusher? But the Bengals have picked up every fifth-year option since Zach Taylor took over as head coach. And given that context, given that history, given what they've seen from Myles, is there any reason to expect them to change course here?
No, and I think you're right to bring up history. And I think you're right to bring it up because of what they did last year. I'm not sure there was a bigger, certainly covering the Bengals, bigger person bullish on Dax Hill than me. And when they picked up his option, I was like, oh, like, are you guys sure? Are you sure you don't want to just try to extend him now? Like, do you want to lock into that money? That's essentially what you're doing. You're locking into that money, and you don't know what he's going to be like coming off of the ACL and everything that goes into that. And they did it because the front office has believed in Dax, similar to how I believed in Dax, and then some, clearly, because the fifth-year option, they didn't really blink. Behind the scenes, they do it, and it paid off. And I think Myles is even more clear-cut. He's not dealing with an injury. He does appear to be ascending. The same coaching issues or disconnect with the coaching staff and front office might apply a bit to Myles. I think more so to Dax than Myles. But my point is, you could easily look at him, Myles, and say, first rounder, we believed in his physical traits. We got Jerry Montgomery here. He got on the field. He started to develop. Why would we not bet on this guy continuing to develop as he enters what should be his prime years, his prime physical years as a football player? And I think that's where they'll end up. And yet, Jake, I got to be honest, and I have the number right in front of me. I'm looking at it right now. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm looking at these different fifth-year option numbers, and I see $14.685 million for Myles Murphy. It just sounds like a lot. And maybe this is a me problem because I felt this way about Dax last year as well. And we know Myles had 5.5 sacks, and we noticed him. It felt like in almost every game in the second half of the season. So he had an impact, and yet I see that number, and I'm like, oh, $14.685 million. It just, it sounds like a lot, and we can get into how it compares. But just for Myles, given what we've seen, it feels pricey.
Whether it's 14.65 or over the cap actually has it a little bit lower, closer to 14 million than the 0.65 additional 650 extra $1,000.
I'll take it. I'll take the extra, Myles. Come on, Myles.
James will claim his commission there as he argues against the Bengals picking up the option. That makes a lot of sense, James.
Did I?
No.
Did I argue against it?
You
It
just
just
said it's
sounds
a
like
lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Yeah,
sounds like a lot of money.
It is.
So currently, $14 million. The guys in that range for edge rushers. If you look just south of it, Jonathan Cooper at $13.5 million with the Denver Broncos, Hassan Reddick at $14 million from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Harold Landry $14.5 million from the New England Patriots, and Eric Armstead, who isn't like explicitly only edge kind of player, is listed here. $14.5 million for him as well. But then you go higher than that, Dayo Odeyingo with the Bears, $16 million. Chase Young, $17 million. Alex Highsmith with the Steelers, $17 million. Bryce Huff, $17 million. Khalil Mack at 35, $18 million. Bradley Chubb, $18 million. It's kind of the going rate for a starting level defensive end, edge rusher in the NFL. And we'll take a look at the free agency class as well. But that would be the expectation for Myles Murphy in his fifth year. I think that is probably the expectation in the building, that he will take, maybe it's just another small step this year, and he's a little bit more consistent as a run defender, because that's where he was really at his best last year, was as a run defender. And then he gets a little bit better as a pass rusher. And maybe he's an 8-9 sack player for you who's winning on his own a little bit more than he was before. Just that little bit of refinement. 24 years old, right? That came into the league really young, has room to develop. But when you stack him up against his peers, even from his own draft class, the pass rush win rate isn't great. It's fine. It's okay, but it's not pushing into the 20%, which is where you would like to see it be for a plus level edge rusher in the NFL. He's kind of in that average starter trajectory. And that's what the pay would reflect, right? The basic fifth-year option, which is what Myles will qualify for because he hasn't reached a playtime threshold or a Pro Bowl. If he had made a Pro Bowl, you're talking about an extra like $8 million on the fifth-year option. So it could be higher if he had been playing better, if he had been playing more. But Myles is only qualifying for the base level here, which, like I said, kind of puts you in that average starter pay level. It's a 1-year commitment for 2027 where the Bengals don't have a ton of cap expenses. I don't think they really think too hard about this, James. Maybe they should think a little bit harder about it, because it isn't nothing. That's $14 million that goes against your cap and is a cash expense for 2027. But I don't think they necessarily think too hard about it. So let's get into what we think they will do with their approach with this fifth-year option for Myles Murphy coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but just wasn't the right fit, well, you know how important it is to find the right fit. When you want candidates that truly match what you're looking for, you got to trust Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs is all you need. And it's going to make life easier. It's going to make life simple. And ultimately, it's going to get you the result that you're looking for. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on these other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page, helps you reach the right candidates faster so you could get to interviewing and find the right fit for the position that you're trying to fill. And look, instead of struggling to keep your job post seen, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps your listing stand out. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted on Indeed are 90% more likely to hire than non-sponsored jobs. Get started today by interviewing candidates that check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, more results using Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get $75 in sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now. Show the support Locked On Bengals, by the way, by making sure they know we sent you. Again, Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, Jake, let's dive into one, what we think they'll do, two, what we would do. And it is an easy sell. Twofold. One, first round pedigree, that matters. Two, ascending player, that matters. Three, you already have a huge hole here. It's already a void. Your main hope right now, whether people want to realize it or not, is Myles taking that step. Is Myles being a little more athletic Sam Hubbard? Is Myles getting a little more juice as a pass rusher? Is him entering his prime and taking another step? I don't think anyone's expecting him to be a superstar, but maybe he can be a consistent starter. Above average starter would be great. And if any of those things happen, then you're going to want to pick up this fifth-year option. Here's my concern. Here's my thought. If they do that and they do this in the deadline beginning of May, right after the draft, and again, I think it'll happen right after the draft, is that going to impact their approach when it comes to Ruben Bain, or when it comes to, even sooner, Odafe Owe, or insert whatever defensive end that you want them to sign? And they, in my mind, they have to sign one. They just kind of have to, like a starting level minimum type guy. And so if you do that, and it doesn't impact your future plans in that way, and your future, like immediate future over the next few months, your offseason plans, then I'm okay with that. Because Myles Murphy shouldn't get in the way of any of the free agents that you want to target, shouldn't get in the way of any trade you want to make, shouldn't get in the way of anything. You're doing this so he can be a piece of the solution, not the solution. And I think that'll be the case, but you never know. They could also say, well, Myles Murphy came on, Shemar's going to come on, we'll add a small piece and keep it rolling. And I don't think that's good enough.
The Bengals defy logic quite often. There are a lot of times I think we've said stuff like, I don't think that'll be the case, or I think that'll be the case. And most of the time we're right. But sometimes they do stuff and we just don't see it the same way as they see it from a logic point of view. Like,
yes.
Their logic works different from our logic sometimes. And so logically, you would say losing Trey Hendrickson and not knowing yet what Shemar Stewart is going to be at the NFL level, because he dealt with injuries, and when he was on the field, he looked lost at times, and they haven't found a way to point that bull in the right direction yet and harness all of that potential. And Myles Murphy took a step, but he's still not winning at an elite rate as a pass rusher. And you really don't have anyone on your team who is an elite pass rusher. And Duke Tobin's standing on the podium right after the season, sitting at the podium, saying, pass rush is king. Of course we need pass rush. And he's probably going to say the same thing at the combine. That's the next time we're going to hear from him. I feel like he said it in previous years at the combine. And so you have these two sides of the same coin that you're talking about, James. One, do you want to dig yourself a hole where you're losing Trey Hendrickson and you've got these 2 first-round picks, and now maybe Myles is playing in the last year of his deal. And now suddenly in 2027, you got Shemar Stewart. Maybe they draft a guy. Who knows? Talk about Ruben Bain. Awesome if that happens. I'm through the roof, through the moon. Thrilled.
That'd be fun.
That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
But big if. And I did just see a mock draft. Field Yates, who had Ruben Bain at 10 to the Bengals. Awesome.
His arms are 12 inches long, so he shouldn't get drafted until 10.
He can't reach.
He can't reach anything. We invited him on the pod. He couldn't reach the camera. He
needs a step stool to reach the top shelf. You simply cannot draft that.
This would be really funny if they drafted him and they clipped this and they put it.
To be clear, we're on board for Ruben Bain right now.
Yeah.
It's February 12th as we're recording this. Point is on the one hand, you could give yourself a potential hole by not having Myles Murphy, who we think is on trajectory to be an average level starter, when you have nothing else in the cupboard right now. Or you can say, all right, we're going to invest that money. Well, if you're going to invest that money to make sure you don't have that hole in 2027, and you're betting on Myles' development, well, that doesn't mean that you now need to neglect the position. That's why it's two sides of the same coin, right? Like you don't just solve it by giving Myles one more year. You still need to get better for 2026. Not even thinking about 2027. Myles is on the team either way in 2026. So to me, I agree with you. Those things should not interact. The fact that you've picked up the 5th-year option should not affect your strategy in getting better in the pass rush in 2026, because you need to do that either way. But I hear your fear. It's the kind of thing that has impacted the Bengals' decision-making in the past and is why I think you mention it.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe they, just to continue with the parallels with Dax, maybe they're like, oh, well, much like DJ Turner did, Shemar Stewart's going to take a big leap. You got to see
When?
it.
In year 3? Like,
No, you hope this year, right? You hope this
Yeah.
year, and it's the same. It aligns the same. But even then, let's just say you have those two guys. You could always use another one. You could always do that. And so I don't think it'll affect them knowing they need to address it, but maybe at the level that we think they need to address it. Maybe that's how I should.
That's
like the
because,
top pass rusher they have on their board in free agency should be who they go after, to be clear, regardless of this 5th-year option. In my mind, whoever it is, go get it.
Now, you talk about things affecting the draft. I think that would be the thing that would end up affecting the draft potentially for them, given their history. But not only do they need another piece, but like even if you have Shemar and Myles and they're like good starters, solid starters, they don't have the high-end guy. They don't have the guy that's going to go out there and win the game for you in the 4th quarter. And maybe those guys do it every now and then. Maybe they get there. They're not there right now, as far as I know. And I hope they get there. But until you know you have that guy,
correct,
and you have him under, and you have the Myles Garrett or the Trey Hendrickson or the Byron Murphy or whoever, right? Who's going to go out there and be able to win you a game in the 4th quarter in a key situation. You should still be pursuing that, even if you have those guys, to your point about like making sure you're not excluding the top end edge prospect, whether you think that's in free agency, which tough sell this year to say that guy is really out there in free agency. There's some guys that could get there similar, but tough sell, or in the draft where I think there are some guys that are interesting this year.
Yeah. You can't have enough. I'm not going to argue it. I do think that you ultimately pick it up. My initial thought was, man, it's a lot of money. But if he gets 9 sacks, let's say, what if he gets 9 sacks this year? It's going to be a lot of money. If he gets 6 sacks, it's not going to be a ton less, especially if he's playing a bunch of downs for you and hopefully developing. And hopefully we're talking about a double-digit sack season for Myles Murphy. We'll call him Big Money Myles if that happens. Got to earn the nickname, though. Up next, some more thoughts on pass rush and juice, and something that Duke Tobin thinks morning, noon, and night. Pass rush. We'll get into it. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I don't know about you, but the winter games, speaking of morning, noon, and night, have been on in my house morning, noon, and night. And FanDuel is going to make the Olympic Games that much more fun, from medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on sports that you care most about to finding your angle on sports that you're just learning or you only see once every 4 years. That's the beauty of the Winter Games, and FanDuel makes it that much more fun. From hockey to different events that become must-watch when you get invested, FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. And of course, if maybe you're not into the Winter Games and you're thinking about NBA or Major League Baseball or NFL future odds, they're all in one spot. FanDuel, of course, the Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game.
I mentioned Myles Murphy's age a couple times, just 24. There's going to be players in this draft older than Myles Murphy.
Yeah.
Just a reminder. Like some of the guys I think that I've seen mocked to the Bengals, even like there's a 25-year-old who might get picked in the top few rounds. Obviously, Mesidor is 25. Myles is 24. Just turned 24 in January. But as we look at the pass rushing landscape this year, I wonder how the Bengals approach this, James. And this is going to be a bigger conversation as we get closer to free agency and we talk about their options for free agency and how that will affect the draft and all these things. But after Trey, the top guys in the pass rusher market, depending on whose list you trust most, Odafe Owe, Jalen Phillips, Boye Mafe, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, probably not guys the Bengals will be super interested in. Jadeveon Clowney.
Would you be open to Khalil or no? I don't think he wants to come to Cincinnati necessarily, but
yeah, I think I would.
I would too.
He's still
I would absolutely be interested. Yeah, I was just curious. And the only reason I say that is he's signed with LA. I assume he just wants to be in LA, like the weather, that, I'm sure he's just used to that. So go ahead.
He's still good. Jadeveon Clowney, also still good.
Yes. By the way, easy one. He's not going to cost a lot either. They praise him all the time, even if he's a little, I don't know. Like, don't you want one? Wouldn't you love it if Shemar Stewart became Jadeveon Clowney? I think you would. So
yeah, I think you'd be relatively pleased with that career outcome, right?
Yeah.
Arnold Ebiketie, I know that's a Joe Goodberry favorite. Draymond Jones, that's a Paul Dehner Jr. favorite. So just circling out to some of our guys on the
there we go.
Bengals beat here. Cameron Jordan,
Clowney had 8.5 sacks last year. Sorry,
yeah,
good.
Still a solid player. Kayvon Chaison's gonna be exciting for some people. I'm less excited about him.
I like
that
him.
To me would be a low, like if you could get him for a lower dollar figure. I think that someone's going to pay him more than I would want to pay him based on his consistency as an every down player. But a couple of themes here stand out as we talk about these guys and think back on the Seahawks and their pursuit and signing of DeMarcus Lawrence and the difference he was able to make for them. One, you could go with the younger guy, the second contract guy, the Owe, the Phillips, the Mafe, the who was the third one, Ebiketie, and bet on one of those guys on their second contract. And Ebiketie might be one of the more interesting ones based on what he's getting projected to earn, less probably than those other guys, and his trajectory where he has certainly been developing. All of them about 27 years old. Or like, can they be open to the 1-year deals for Khalil Mack or Jadeveon Clowney, the way that the Seahawks did? I think they did a 2-year deal actually with DeMarcus Lawrence, but like, are they going to stick to their current approach from an age point of view where they prefer the younger players? And there's reason to prefer the younger players, but there are these guys that are established and have the track record. And this is the argument with Trey. This was our argument last year with extending Trey. When they perform at that level for long enough, the decline generally isn't as sharp. Like sometimes, yeah, you're walking and you find the end of that cliff and you fall off the cliff. Injuries often contribute to that in a big way when players get to their 30s. But a lot of times these guys do have a more gradual decline where they're still good players in their early 30s.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And you need that production now. Like you can't, like I was talking with Dan Hoard yesterday, the day before, whatever, and he brings up Peter Woods, and we'll be able to talk about him more. But it's one thing to be like, oh, well, the Bengals got this awesome young defensive tackle that's going to develop into one of the game's best. And that's great. Like that would be great if you could get that at 10. But guess what? Doesn't necessarily help you right now. And I think that's a tough part of it where you really need to address it in free agency so you don't feel the need, even though at 10 you should get instant impact. And there's a delicate balance there. Like, what if Shemar does become a Pro Bowler? But right now it doesn't feel like it. It feels like he's anything but that to the fan base, certainly. And so that's it. That's the tough spot about being so bad, yet everyone thinking you should be in win now mode, you thinking you should be in win now mode. It's you can't put yourself in a position where you take the worst prospect because of the need. And yet if you take the best prospect, but it's going to take them a year or two, everyone's going to be pointing at you like, hey, it's a failure. And Myles Murphy is the prime example of that to kind of round things out. Sometimes it takes some time. Sometimes you're trying to win. And so you play the veteran that has been there, done that in huge games. And it takes that rookie or that young player a bit longer to develop. And it can be a tough balance at times, put it that way. Now the Bengals are young enough to where you hope that's not the case. And if you draft someone at 10, even if they're 20 years old, you're hoping that they can contribute right away. I get it. But what if it goes the other way? And so that's just overall, especially I think trench play and defensive line development, it can be that way sometimes. And hopefully Myles is the example of that where, like I said, he's about to explode and have a huge season.
Especially true on the interior defensive line. When you talk about Peter Woods specifically, that one, I mean, that's going to be an entire episode one of these days is Peter Woods specifically. And, you know, we'll be talking about interior defensive line development and how hard it is. Because I think I've said this a couple times recently. I think interior defensive line, like those guys, the game wreckers on the interior defensive line, is the second hardest thing to find in the sport right now. I think it's quarterback and then game wrecking defensive tackle.
Yeah, you're right.
There's just so few of them. Every
You're
year,
right.
there's so few. I don't know if I'm like objectively right. That's definitely a vibe saying like I haven't gone to check the data, and this is something that you could go prove, but that's definitely
Mhm.
how it feels to me. There's just so
I
few of those guys every year.
I think you're right. What else is harder to find?
I would think like high end tackles, but there's so many tackles. There's so many receivers every year. I guess high end tight ends, pretty tough.
Yeah,
Like
maybe, but
really good tight
then you
ends.
have to define tight end and which guys do everything versus not and catch,
I'm talking about the
like
guys
there's
that do everything. Like yeah,
sure.
the George
And they're hard to
Kittles.
find. There's not many.
Yeah,
The Bengals could use one of those guys, by the way.
yeah,
There.
tough to find.
Talk about needs on offense
Yeah.
that no one wants to talk about. Anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the impact of a Geno Atkins or an Aaron Donald or a Byron Murphy, or we'll see what happens with Walter Nolan's career. We know the Bengals were interested there, right? And so really
Would
hard to find those guys.
would you give up this entire draft class if it meant getting 5 years of prime Geno Atkins? I would. I'm just curious if you would.
Yeah,
Okay.
prime Geno. I
Yeah,
mean, talk about
yeah,
Hall of Fame level player.
no
Just
doubt.
dropping them in there, man. I
Yeah.
think
Be
that
great.
makes a huge
Would
difference.
change
Yeah, because
everything.
if you get Geno and I mean, and that takes
Suddenly
you to a
everybody
Geno.
would look better. Like they
Well,
didn't like Carlos Dunlap was really good, but they didn't have like a Trey Hendrickson level
mhm.
pass rusher
Carlos was
during
really good.
that time. He was.
Yeah.
He was. But
Not quite
Trey
the
from a
pass
pass rush
rusher.
standpoint.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a little
Trey.
bit more well-rounded than Trey. Not quite the pass rusher.
Yep.
In his best years anyway. Not quite the pass rusher that Trey was. That kind of leads you to a conversation about Jeffrey Simmons, though, I think.
Mm.
Not that
Mm.
I think either of us expect him to be available,
We should.
but
We should have that conversation on a show. A full
but like
convo.
if you're willing to give up essentially, yeah, like an entire draft, right, for 5 years of Geno, which you wouldn't be getting 5 years of prime Jeffrey Simmons, but it's kind of like a similar thought process, right? Giving up a first round pick. And I don't know what Simmons would cost. Maybe he costs you first. I don't think he's available. Kind of moot potentially, but there's a conversation there.
Yeah. I mean, if you offered 10, the Titans couldn't just hang up right away. I would say that. Now, it doesn't mean that they would take it, but I don't know if they'd hang up right away. Real quick, you mentioned Caleb on Chase on how you're leery about how much he's going to get paid. Over under him getting paid $14 million average annual value. I would say under.
I wouldn't be surprised if it goes over.
It could go over. And that's the point about Myles, right?
And I don't know that I would prefer Caleb on Chase on the field to Myles. Like Caleb on Chase to me is like a rotational guy.
Yeah. I wanted him last year. I want him when he's cheap.
Yeah.
Like I think that those are the type of guys, the pedigree that you target, and you hope that they figure it out.
And the Bengals kind of did that. Like Isaiah Foskey is on the roster. He tested really well, and we'll see if he has an opportunity in training camp to carve a path out for himself or not as a rotational player. But Foskey had great production and athleticism in college. That's all.
Trey, who we got Foskey.
Rotational player. We're not talking about starting.
I'm just using the logic.
We'll wrap up there on this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Combine right around the corner. Got to get there, James. And then some things will start moving around this league. Until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.